Hey, good evening, family. This is A.L. Johnson with A.L. Johnson Life Insurance Agency. Thanks for tuning in. As always, we're here to bring you some good quality information that you can apply to your life to improve the situation of your family. As always, like we say, life insurance is important. And so today we're going to be having a conversation with a funeral director from Lawrence A. Jones Funeral Homes, Mr. Larnell Jones. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, good evening. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
definitely, definitely.
well,
So we had Mr. Jones on here just a few weeks back. It was a great show, a lot of good information. When it comes to funeral planning, it's really a taboo subject in our community. We just kind of wait until the time comes, and then we scramble and we scrape and we try to figure it out at the last minute. And there's a lot of challenges, a lot of hurdles that come to laying our loved ones to rest properly. And so it's really our belief here that people do perish from a lack of knowledge, especially in our community. And so that's why we do these live streams to really eliminate, that excuse. The point of not getting the knowledge. We're definitely going to continue to provide that, but it's important that you tune into these live streams, take notes, and apply what you learn. Most importantly, applying what you learn. That's the very important part. And so earlier today, we actually had an interview with Mr. Zebulon Jackson of Edward Jones. Go back and watch the replay on that. We talked about the stock market, some good tips for you to be able to invest and grow your money. Very, very great content. And so definitely go back and watch the replay of that. But getting into today's conversation, how to avoid a family funeral crisis. It happens more often than you think. When I'm looking up and down my timeline every day, I'm seeing, people giving condolences for loved ones that have been lost. We had a tough year collectively with COVID-19. Many lives were lost. It's something that we deal with all the time, but it's not something that we talk about enough from a standpoint of preparation. And so we're going to definitely jump into that today. Larnell, I did have my first question that I wanted to ask you. So now that COVID has kind of like some eased some of the restrictions, we see that the clubs and the bars, they're open, full time and things like that. Have they changed anything with the funeral homes as of yet, as far as the limits on the number of people that are able to attend?
yeah. Well, what I will say is that while the restrictions have been kind of relaxed, for like a better words, I know at Lawrence Jones, we're still trying to protect family, protect our staff members as well. So we're still abiding by some level of restriction as far as the amount of people to attend services. Um, Also, a lot of cemeteries still are kind of abiding by the ordinances before. I think it was 2 weeks ago when Mayor Lucas lifted the ordinance, to allow more, to allow restaurants, bars, and other venues to to stay open later and allow more people to be in the capacity of the venue. But a lot of cemeteries are still limiting the amount of people who can attend graveside ceremonies as well. So um, temperatures are still being taken. COVID registries are also still being which allow making people sign and keeping track of the amount of attendees at memorial services and gatherings.
Right. So I know the last time that we spoke, the limit was at 50% of capacity,
Right.
which
Correct.
came up to about 50 people. And that includes, I don't remember, does that include the staff of the funeral home as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. Staff, the clergy, if it's a spiritual or religious ceremony, and clergy, absolutely correct.
Okay. On average, how many people are involved from a staff perspective in the funeral? Who all is involved in that process?
Generally, you have a licensed funeral director. You also normally have a lady attendant, which is another term for what I call like a personal assistant for the family the entire time of the service. Then you normally have about one to two funeral attendants as well to assist during someone's memorial service.
Got it. Got it. I appreciate that. Another question that came up after our live stream, I got bombarded with questions, and so I'm gonna definitely pass those on to you. But
Right.
one of the questions, and it's something that I discuss with a lot of my life insurance clients, are, what are some ways for people who are unprepared, because we can't avoid that happens. It's unfortunate, but it does. And so in those situations, when a person doesn't have life insurance and the family has to come up with money, they of course want to be able to have savings wherever that they can, and kind of maybe cut some corners to make it work.
Right.
And so what are some ways that a person can save money on a funeral when it hits them unexpectedly?
Yeah, very, very, very good question. So generally speaking, there are things like programs, flowers, register book, guest books, things of that nature that people, can that are part of a funeral ceremony or memorial gathering or what have you. And so nowadays with technology, people are able to download technology online. They're also able to, do programs themselves. You don't have to use the floors that the funeral home, has a partnership with. Nowadays, with technology and resources like that, you can, order files online for someone's service or funeral ceremony. Same thing with like your guest book, things of that nature. You can order those things separately outside of having the funeral home service the items for you.
Now, what about as far as the caskets? I don't know exactly what you all charge, but I do know there are situations where you can get a casket from an outside source and have it brought to the funeral home. Do you suggest that in that situation?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so nowadays, obviously, with you have places like Costco. To be real about it, but Costco, there are online casket companies that allow families to go online, purchase a casket, and will have it delivered directly to the funeral home. There are some funeral firms that might charge like a holding fee or a service fee, or what have you. But every firm is different, of course. But that is also a possibility for families as well.
I really salute you for providing this information, because I've been in the insurance business for 12 years. I've worked with a lot of the funeral homes in the city. Most of them are great, but I can say that a lot of them are not willing to provide information such as this, in which you're telling people how to save money, how to essentially give less money to
Yeah.
the funeral home. I mean, you just don't get that. And so those of you that are tuning in and you're looking for an honest, forthright company to work with for your family, I definitely highly recommend Warren St. Jones. They're good people. And, as you see here, they'll tell you how to save money on the funeral. I did want to touch bases on one thing. So I've actually, unfortunately, had to pay out a couple of claims through my agency
Yeah.
here in the past few weeks. And so, that's been a little tough. Everything went smooth.
Mm.
And so that was great. The claims were paid out, the families were taken care of, but there are those rare situations in which a person may have life insurance, but for some reason the insurance or the funeral home isn't able to accept that policy. And I know we touched on that last time, but what are the most common instances where you see that a life insurance policy that isn't able to be paid out?
Yeah, definitely great question. So, and as I'm sure you can vouch for this as well, where with the majority of life insurance policies, the policy owner has to have had the policy at least 2 years or more before the funeral home can utilize the policy, or what we call contestable, meaning that the company or the company that you have the policy with will only pay back the amount of the premium amount that has been invested within that 2 year time frame.
Now,
And I
and
know a
yes.
lot of people oftentimes when it gets to that point with families, and they're kind of like, well, the insurance agent told me this. They said I had coverage immediate upon making the initial installment or what have you, and so you kind of have to explain the what I call the fine print or
Yeah, yeah.
that's contracts that, while that is very true. And I'm sure you can also explain this more about things like pre-existing conditions and just the potential for applicants to lie on application. And so that's why that 2 year clause is in place to avoid, the insurance company from fraud or, from people being deceptive on the application process, which would prohibit them from being able to, to pay the entire claim out.
So, for clarity on that point, there actually are there's two separate instances, and so you have what you mentioned, the contestability period. That's on any life insurance policy
Right.
in that first 2 years. And so it doesn't necessarily mean the insurance company won't pay out, but if something happens in the first 2 years outside of an accident, they'll investigate
Right.
and make sure that, everything on the application was correct and proper. If so, they will still pay out. The situation where they only refund the premium, that's called a 2-year waiting period. And so a lot of times when you're watching TV and you see an insurance commercial that says no health questions asked, it's a way that the insurance company protects themselves from early claims. And so in any of those policies, if they don't ask any health questions, there's nothing to say that you aren't on your deathbed at the time of application. And so they put that 2-year waiting period in to protect themselves. And so I always encourage everyone, there's about 2 reasons that I see. One is term policies that are terminated. And so for the senior members in your family, you always want to check their policy to make sure that it isn't a term policy that will expire. A lot of those will expire around the age of 80. And so I've seen that happen several times where someone's 81, 82 years old, they pass away. There was a policy they had been paying on for 20 years, but didn't realize that the policy terminated. And then the family takes it to the funeral home and there's no benefit, which is a very sad situation. And so just having life insurance, just having the policy isn't enough. It's very prudent and wise to actually have that policy reviewed periodically and actually jot down the bullet points of the policy so you know exactly how it'll work when that time comes and there's no surprises for the family. It's very, very, very important to do that.
Yeah, that's a great perspective there, because I was even thinking about, I think, originally when life insurance was first being offered to, in general, the whole idea was it's an investment, for an individual future. And it was more or less an income replacement for, for a surviving spouse or what have you. And so, not only did it cover your funeral expenses, it covers, an outstanding mortgage or, kids' educations and things of that nature. Outstanding bills that might be left by that still have to be owed if the primary breadwinner is no longer, living. And so I think if most people understand that even outside of the funeral process or in the life care, that's where, you look at it from an investment, or a longevity perspective, then, you would kind of keep up, you want people to keep up more with, that the coverage amount, when it expires or what have you, to avoid issues like that in the future.
Let's touch a little bit on how preneed and life insurance work together. And so life insurance, you get through a life insurance agency. That's money that goes to your family. It's just in the form of a check that can be used for anything. Sometimes people get that confused with preneed plans directly from the funeral home. And so can you explain exactly what a preneed is and how that works?
Yeah, basically our preneed, what they are is ours are our trust funded preneed for the most part. We do have some that are insurance funded, and we do have some that are trust funds in Larnell Jones specifically. But the idea behind the preneed is that, that individual will come in and, pre-plan for their funeral. So just customizing every small detail, from if it's the burial, the casket, choosing the appropriate package, whether you want to have a funeral ceremony or whether you want to have a graveside service. You can literally include every small detail, from like the programs, the amount of programs, or obituaries is another term, as well as flowers, death certificates, you name it. And obviously the whole idea behind it was to obviously lock in the prices, because we know that prices are going to increase, if not every, it's not every year, every 5 to 10 years. And so when an individual passes away 15, 20, 30 years from the time that they took out the contract with the funeral home, then a substantial amount of money would have been saved as a result of paying it at the current day's prices, or what have you.
That makes a lot of sense.
Also, it alleviates, the pressure of having an individual or survivor to make all the decision-making process once the individual has passed away.
Got it. So what about on the flip side of that? So say a family has a life insurance policy, but it doesn't fully meet the need. Because I see a lot of policies that were purchased, a long time ago for $2,000, $3,000 that are on the senior members of our community. And so when they pass away and there's a gap between the cost of the funeral service and their life insurance policy, how is that gap addressed, and what type of timeline does it need to be addressed in?
Well, I think that's a really great that's good approach there. I'm thinking in most situations, I think the challenge is trying to define what is needed, and what the person actually wants, and then you kind of know what kind of coverage that you might need to have. If that makes sense.
No, yeah.
And
So if the person say if they needed, just for a rough example, if the
yeah,
funeral cost 7,000, they had a $3,000 policy. There's that
right.
$4,000 gap. Does that $4,000 need to be paid prior to the funeral service, or are there like payment plans in that situation, or how do you guys work with that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely a great question. So yeah, the payment would have to that remaining balance would have to be paid before the funeral. Right, absolutely.
Okay, got it. That makes perfect sense. So we've been talking a lot here in the last couple of weeks about the mindset of the people in our community when it comes to planning in advance, and not just
Mhm.
with funeral planning, just with everything in general. We're very short-sighted as a people, and you see it in our spending habits. We're the biggest consumers. We have the least amount of savings, and we're
Right.
just generally unprepared for a lot of the unforeseen events in life. My question from your end of it, because you kind of see things on the back end, and so what I mean by that, I can preach all day. Hey, you need to purchase life insurance. Life
Right.
insurance is important, but the product that I sell, you don't feel anything until it's too late, right?
Right.
And
Right.
like with
Right.
Mr.
Right.
Jackson
Right.
from Edward Jones, we were talking about investing earlier. If you start investing early, we showed the example $5,000 at 7% interest over 18 years is almost $170,000 from just a one-time income tax check that you invested properly. And so my
Sure.
question to you, from your years in working on the back end of it, where you really see the heartache and the stress and the struggle from people being unprepared, what do you feel the reason is? Because it happens so much. We're familiar with the situations. We see it all the time. Why haven't we changed?
I think one thing, that I think that's always going to be universal for anybody is that death is one of those conversations that no one just wants to have. It's the uncomfortable conversation. It's the it's a situation that we can't control anymore. And so we can't control something. Once we don't understand it, then we avoid it, right?
Mhm.
And so, but to answer your question, oftentimes, in my experience, what I've seen is that people are just afraid to have that initial conversation, to be real about it. And so, unfortunately, um, family talk about everything else but death and what's to happen when someone passes away. So, um, again, I think that's the challenge that we're facing.
So what's the average age you would say of the family that comes in and prepares for their funeral? And I'm not talking about last minute or anything like that, but the average age of people who are planning ahead from your perspective.
Grant, I'm thinking around like the 50s or the 60s, so I have you around that age bracket. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So is it pretty rare for you to have someone in their 30s or 40s? Is that kind of rare for you?
Oh yeah. When it gets to that point, I'm kind of like, what's going on in your life that you feel you need to plan ahead of time?
Yeah, you got somebody after you. What's going on? And,
Right.
and,
Right.
and that's the thing, we have to normalize
That's right.
getting serious about our finances and our planning
Right.
earlier in life, because usually by 30 years old, you have a child, there's someone who's dependent
Right.
on you for sustaining their life. And so
True.
life insurance is extremely important. And additionally, planning, because when you're in your 30s, God forbid if something were to happen to you, your parents, who may be in their 60s or 70s in their later years, are the ones who are going to have to take on the stress and the
Right.
burden of not only taking care of your funeral arrangements, but potentially taking your children and having to raise them. And so it's things that we don't think about. But if you watch the news or you look at the newspaper, it's giving us, warnings every single day that
Right.
life isn't promised. We're not guaranteed to live to a certain age. Death is random. And so we never know when it's going to knock on our door. The most that we can do is be prepared in such a way that we don't leave our family in a bind. And so I just think that's extremely important. And one of the biggest reasons I feel that a lot of people don't plan with life insurance as well is they overestimate the cost.
Hmm. Hmm.
Definitely overestimate the cost. And so, what have you seen from that as far as people coming in, making their arrangements, and then you tell them the price? Are they generally surprised at how low the payments are, or when you refer to an insurance agency such as mine, do you see that they come back and they're a little surprised that the payment was lower than they expected?
Well, yeah, more definitely, because I think obviously, everyone watches TV, right, or what have you. So I think sometimes media tend to inflate what the reality is oftentimes. And so it just takes a simple visit or a phone call to a professional, whether it's the funeral home or an insurance agent, to find out what the actual reality is. But yeah, so most of the time I do get a very surprised perspective when you kind of break it down, especially with those pre needs, because for example, we have a plan that's as low as $50 a month or what have you. And I think most people would be alarmed to know that a standard insurance policy can cost you sometimes, depending on your age and the coverage amount, it could be even less than that a month, to cover yourself.
Larnell, let's talk about pricing because this will blow your mind. So, I was
Sure.
helping a client yesterday. She had a 22-year-old son. She just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure that he had some sort of protection because he has a child on the
Right.
way, and she's
Mhm.
trying to help him get everything in order. At his age, he was able to get a $25,000 policy permanent for the rest of his life for less than $10 a month.
I believe it. Absolutely. I believe it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, when we're talking about these plans, it's not an arm and a leg. It's not any more than a lot of people spend at the drive-through. Even for older people, it's
Yeah.
less than the price of a dinner.
Right.
And so it's really a situation where we don't prioritize. We don't feel that it's important. Let me ask you this: do you feel that our culture has created a nature of selfishness, like it's all about me in my lifetime, what I can gain, and that maybe we don't look past ourselves as much as in the past because life insurance purchasing rates in our community has actually declined. What would you say the reason for that is?
Um, man, what, that's a really good question, actually. Again, I'm thinking, it's probably one thing I would say about this. I definitely see where the generation before us were a little bit more prepared
Hmm.
for end of life type of situation, whereas I'm currently seeing maybe the millennials not really having the conversation. I think it just goes back to, um, I want to call it age, but just like preparation, feeling like that you're invincible, then nothing's going to happen to you, actually, or what have you. I know when it comes to servicing a lot of people around my age or a few years older, the perspective as far as planning ahead of time is that, well, I got covered through my job. You know what I mean? And if we all know that, tomorrow we could be fired up for our job, so then where's the coverage? Where's the
Exactly.
preparation? What are you gonna do at that point? So I'm thinking most of it it's probably just mentality, it's mindset, and
Um,
just again, I like to want to have the real conversation that every day is not a promise, and that something could happen to you, in 5 minutes, and then your family is left to pick up the pieces and figure it out.
mm, mm. Well, when you have children, so I know we kind of touched on the older people and the younger people and things
Right.
like that, but I know it's a rare situation. It doesn't happen all the time. I have children myself.
Sure.
I do have life insurance for each of my children, but have you ever ran into a situation where a person lost their child and there wasn't life insurance, or do you see that they're generally covered?
Yeah, I definitely. In most situations, most people don't have coverage on their kids. I mean, I have been in a handful of situations where coverage was provided. Most parents have their kids as riders on their policies. If it's like a policy with their employee place of employment, or some private insurance, normally kids under 18, or I think actually under 21, or most parents put them on riders. But there are instances where I've seen it where the family didn't have coverage, and obviously for obvious reasons they didn't. You're not expecting a minor to pass away maturely or prematurely. I mean, so yeah.
And so we got a couple of comments here. One says it's definitely scary to talk about. One thing that I can say from my years of experience, it is a very uncomfortable conversation.
Sure.
It really is. But one thing that I noticed, even with myself, I remember purchasing life insurance some years back, and I was traveling on the highway. I'm on a two-lane highway. There was a semi truck, and for a brief second, it felt as
Mhm.
if we were going to cross into each other's lanes, and I saw my life flash before my eyes.
Wow.
And so I
Yeah.
had to pull over. I was kind of shook up, and things like that. And no joke, the first thing that popped in my mind was life insurance and what would happen to my children if that accident would have happened. I say
Hmm.
that to say this. After you take care of it, once you take care of your life insurance, once you take care of your funeral plan and all of that, and it's done and it's set, you don't have to think about it anymore. I think that's the part that people miss out. The portion, the reason that you plan
Right.
is for your family. It makes it easy on them, but it also gives you a peace of mind while you're living that things will
Right.
be taken care of versus day to day. Every time you see a life insurance commercial or someone talks about funeral planning, your heart starts beating because you haven't taken care of what you need to take care of. You haven't been responsible. And so it creates anxiety. Just go ahead and remove the anxiety by taking care of it. That's what I say. That's what I say.
And the interesting part is, many people watch the news every night, right? And all the all the killings and homicides and all the just the unfortunate actions that happen. You would think that the reality, that people would kind of a light bulb would would turn on about this subject matter. But again, unfortunately, we never think it's going to happen to us. And so again, that keeps us from having to to face the reality and have the conversation. So yeah.
No, and that's what really gets me about this conversation half ago, but it was about racism and life insurance,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Tell me more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was reading a study. It was a university study on life insurance pre-civil rights era, and at
Hmm.
that time, as Black people, we were done wrong in the life insurance industry. They would charge us 3 times as much for the exact same policy as a white person.
Hmm.
They would cap the amount of coverage that we could get, so it locked us out of wealth. And so when you look at the wealth gap now, a lot of that we don't talk about it. We talk about real estate and business, but a lot of it was actually life insurance. And so
Right.
when they were buying policies for their families that would be enough to purchase a home,
That's right.
buy some land, start a business, invest
Mhm.
in the stock market, we had small 500, $1,000 policies, $2,000 policies that were literally enough to, bury grandpa and keep it moving.
That's
And
right.
so
Right.
that can only happen for so many generations where you have people passing away and then a business is purchased or a home or an apartment complex, a duplex or something along those lines. And as we're passing away, all of the money's going directly to funeral services and maybe a little bit of debt. And so, we definitely have to change that because now the door is wide open for us.
I mean, but do you think that that came from the whole thing that most of the time the approach back then, even nowadays, it's just about your funeral costs versus that life insurance will cover things outside. That is more of an investment for the future and an income replacement versus just funeral costs. I mean, to be real about it, you look on TV and you see the Colonial Penn commercials, and they talk about their primary focus is someone's funeral expenses and burial expenses,
Right.
what happens. So you don't get the whole conversation that taking
What, you're
out
right. You're absolutely
$15,000
right.
policy, is more than just a funeral. You have kids, who are teenagers or minors. You still want to pay use those funds to put in a trust, for the college or to buy their
Right.
first home or the first car or to an investment account. That is more than just a cover funeral expenses. It's again it's an income replacement and again planning it helps plan for the future.
Yeah, it's part of the burden on that really lies with the marketing of insurance, and I hadn't
Sure.
given that much thought, so I appreciate you bringing that up because actually, when it comes to that, so your Colonial Penn, remember when I talked about the 2-year waiting period,
Right.
versus the contestable period? Well, Colonial Penn automatically sells a 2-year waiting period because they're a mail company. So they're just sending out letters in the mail to people between the ages
Right.
of 50 and 80. And they price the policy and put terms on it that assume that you're in, you're unhealthy. Because
Hmm.
of that, the premiums are higher. And so when they market the reason for you to purchase it, people aren't buying $100,000, $150,000 from Colonial Penn. They're buying 5,000, 10,000, 15,000,
That's true.
and so they're marketing it specifically to the funeral. Well, on the
Hmm.
flip side of that, for younger people, if you pay attention to maybe like Select Quote commercials or companies like that, it's usually
Hmm.
geared towards protecting your mortgage. Um,
True.
or
Right.
raising your children. Now, the problem there, I'm seeing the whole landscape is that that's a term policy that terminates. And so the policy that would actually provide wealth for the family that's a large enough amount is a policy that will terminate and is going to be outlived. And so what I try to encourage people to do is when you're younger, there really isn't a huge difference between a permanent policy and a term life insurance policy. Get something permanent so that when you're in your 60s or 70s, if the Lord blesses you to live that long, and the
Mhm.
time comes, you're not leaving your family $10,000 or $15,000 to just put in the ground. You can have a policy from when you were younger that's for a considerable amount of money that your family can do something with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. Now, can you kind of explain the difference between term and whole and permanent life insurance or what have you? That way people know the difference.
Most definitely. So the easiest way to remember it is your term life insurance terminates. That's how I remembered it for the test. If it's term, it terminates. You just have to ask yourself, when does it terminate? And are you okay with it terminating at that time? So they usually sell it in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 15-year increments, or to a certain age. And so if you purchased a home, you have a 30-year mortgage, you can get a 30-year term life insurance policy that's going to terminate in 30 years because the mortgage will be paid off, and that's the reason you purchased it. So you get term life insurance for temporary needs. And then on
Mm.
the flip side, you have whole life insurance. And so that's insurance that lasts your whole life as long as you continue to make the payments. That's going to be there for the family. Now, a
And
lot of
that's
times
what
you'll see,
cash value, right, as well.
yes, so whole life does build a cash value. Sometimes you'll see like Dave Ramsey or other people talk against cash value. Cash value is not an investment. And so I think that's where the lines get a little blurred. Cash value actually strengthens the policy. What do I mean
Mm.
by that? With a term policy, if at any point in time you stop making the payment, all of the coverage goes away. With a whole life policy that has cash value, say 20 years down the line, you want to stop making payments, you're actually building up equity. So you can stop making payments and there's still a reduced amount of coverage left for the family.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so those are the two main differences. And there's another policy type that's very, very rarely talked about, which is universal life. And it's just like a universal remote. It's interchangeable. And so it can go to any specific age. It can build cash value or not. And with
Yeah.
that flexibility, you're able to make the premium exactly what you need it to be. And so there's a lot of options out there, but it's really, like you said, about us getting out and educating people. And so
Yeah.
that's why we do this here on this platform. So that was a great question. That was a great question. Um,
Sure.
Now on the on the funeral home side of it, I know we touched bases on this the last time that we spoke, but I believe since then you guys had a little bit of a change in your rates. And so,
Yeah.
just for clarity, what is the average cost of the funeral now? Just a basic traditional funeral.
So for a traditional burial service, where you have everything within one day, like the visitation, wake, or what we call a same day traditional funeral service, you're looking at like basically 5,000, so 49.95, and that covers all the features for having the service. The limousine service, the police escort, having your loved one prepared. Any details of coordinating between the cemetery, the military, if it's a veteran, floor shop, printer, you name it. Now that probably does include the casket, so your casket of choice, and then the programs and fire would all be additional charges on top of that 49.95 figure. And again, remember that's just for burial purpose.
So, what about in the instance of cremation? I know a lot of people are starting to lean towards that because it's cost effective. And so, what's the cost of your cremations?
Right now, for a full service with cremation foam, you're looking at about 47.95, and again, that covers the cost of renting the casket, and also having the cremation performed, and then having the funeral ceremony, limousine, prepare the body, the beautician, the musician, the organist. All those features are included within that fee as well. And again, the casket is already included within that as well. For a standard, what we call a celebration of life or memorial service, that's running you about 29.95, and there is a viewing for the family that's included within that package as well.
Got it. Got it. I appreciate you giving that information. Got a question here from Ron. He said, AJ, would you say term life is a better option for young adults? It's really about cost, your tolerance for the cost of the policy. And so term is going to be your most affordable. And so if budget is a concern, definitely go with term. But if you're trying to fulfill a permanent need, you need a permanent policy. I can't stress that enough. If it's a permanent need, you want a permanent policy. Your permanent needs are your funeral planning and whatever inheritance you want to leave behind for your family, whether that's to take care of estate taxes or to build something for the future. And the reason that is because we don't know when God is going to call us home. And
Mm.
life insurance pricing is based off of your age and your health at the time that you get it. You're never going to be younger and healthier than you are today. And so a lot of times what I see with term policies, it's good, but 20 to 30 years from now, when you look at that price and it's time for you to get a new policy, that's where we, extend the wealth gap, because you have people going from $100,000, $200,000 in coverage down to 10 or 15,000. And I see it happen every single day. And so if your budget allows, it makes sense to get a permanent policy. It doesn't have to be traditional whole life that builds cash value. It can be universal life, but you want something that's going to last forever if your budget allows. If your budget does not allow, get a term policy, but you want to make sure that it has what's called a conversion privilege. That conversion privilege allows you to change the policy to something permanent at any time during that term without evidence of insurability. And so what you don't want is to get into a policy 10, 15 years later, you have to go and get a new policy. But within that time, you've developed cancer or you've had a heart attack or a stroke, and you don't qualify. And so you want to protect your insurability. So if you do get term, make sure that it does have a conversion privilege. But if your budget can allow, go ahead and fill the need permanently. I think that's the best way to do it. Hopefully that answers your question. Just a second here. Got a couple other. Yeah. Miss Niggy, she said it's a legacy conversation that is missing. I completely agree with that. Completely agree.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And so talking about legacy, Lawrence A. Jones, how long have y'all been around? You're like ingrained in Kansas City. So how long have you been around?
Yeah, we've definitely been blessed to be serving the community still. So this is our 71st year actually. So I am I'm from the third generation. So my grandparents were the founders. They began business in 1950 or what have you. So we're blessed to be four generations now.
That's amazing. Let me ask you this, because I'm really big on the family. If you see the logo for A.L. Johnson Life Insurance Agency, it actually represents, man, woman, and child. Outside of the insurance agency, I have a project I'm working on called Elevating Men, which is about rebuilding men so that we can rebuild families and rebuild our communities. That's what I'm all about. And so I'd like to ask you, man, as you're third, fourth generation Jones?
Yeah, I'm third. Yeah.
What type of security do you feel, having had your forefathers lay such a clear path, for you? What does that feel like to be a part of a family business?
Well, I mean, it definitely, it's definitely a proud, but very proud to be a part of something like that. I mean, 'cause I know that everyone doesn't have that opportunity, to be in a family business, especially to have the whole longevity component attached to it as well. Um, of course, obviously, my background, my background is actually healthcare, right? So I didn't, as my father and my uncles before me have been involved in the business. I didn't get that same everyday, growing up in the business approach to things. Growing up out of town actually as well. But again, to answer your question, definitely a lot to be grateful for. Definitely very humbling because I do know again it's not an opportunity that someone is afforded every single day as well.
Did you find that it was easier for you to find your path in life, with your family having that business? Was it easier for you to, pick a career path, or were you just like everybody else, talking to the student counselor and just trying to figure it out?
Yes and no. My background is actually healthcare, right? So I did that for like 14 years prior to going into business. But always, obviously in the back of my head, there was always this curiosity that I'm like, I wonder what they really do, like what they really look like, or what have you. And so that kind of, for me personally, curiosity kind of killed the cat. And so after doing 2 years in biology, anticipating going to med school, I remember having a conversation with my sister. I was living, I think, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. No, I was actually here in Kansas City visiting her. And she was like, well, yeah. She said, you got it honest. It makes sense. You've been around it all your life. So,
So have more as far as the third generation of your family. Do
Yeah.
you have? Is it just you that went into the business, or are there a bunch of Joneses in the third generation?
Right. So I'm getting on the third generation. So my uncle Lindsey Jones actually owned the business.
Okay.
He's second generation. Then I have, of course, I know you know my uncle Lawrence Jones Jr. He's semi-retired, but he's still active in the business part time. Then let's see here. I have my cousins. So for our third generation, I have my cousin DeLawrence Shepherd Sr. and myself. We both represent the third generation in the business, and then his daughter is she makes the fourth generation. She's involved in administrative type duties there at the firm as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
just groom them up. Keep it going. Keep it
all
going.
right,
That's a beautiful
absolutely.
thing. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of business owners that tune into these live streams, and so for someone who has a business that they know they're going to pass on,
Mhm.
the intent is to pass it on through the
Yeah.
family. Um, what are some suggestions that you can give from your point of view of being in a family business? That transition. What does that look like?
Oh man, so I would say to be open minded. It's like any other dynamic. Family can be family, but be open minded. Be open to change. Be very flexible as well. And yeah, and obviously be able to be. Don't let it get to your head. Stay humble. But yeah, so yeah. I think that's a good recipe to for continuity and for sustaining a family business.
You hear that. So for all of you that have businesses, if you intend on passing it on to your children, make sure they grow up as humble, uh, hardworking human beings who are ready to continue on a legacy. That's huge.
And then one thing I also add to that is to and I always say I always get this from I think from the past president Barack Obama, his wife Michelle Obama, First
Mhm.
Lady Michelle Obama. They always want to normalize their daughters' lives. So just stay normal. Maintain that level of normalcy. That way, things go as normal as possible. To be real about it.
Right, right. Now I can only imagine. This is kind of off the wall question, but I can only imagine the
Yes,
hookups
ma'am.
you get asked for because your family's so visible
Yeah,
to
they
people
are.
in the city, and you guys help out a lot because you guys have helped a couple of my clients, adjusted some things for them. But um,
Right.
do you get a lot of that? Like, well, I mean, it's your family's funeral home, man. Go ahead and knock the price down or something like that.
Right. That's true. That's true. Obviously, as I understand, my grandparents were very, very giving, very benevolent. But at the same time, we have to realize it is a place of business, and that not only is it just family, you have people who are working there, who are leaning on us to take care of, their lives, to take care of their lives as well. What have you?
You got salaries to pay and things
Right,
like that.
exactly.
People on payroll.
Who are college
And
educated, people who have degrees in this business, and so they have, you have to. It is the reality is that things have to be paid for.
right, right. And we want businesses like yours in our community to stay around for the long term. And
Yes,
so,
sir.
definitely, we want to keep that in mind. Now, we did have one last question here, Mr. Brown. He said, let's see, has the cost of having a proper funeral for your loved one decreased or increased? I feel like I should already know the answer to this. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but
Right.
what's your response to that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Again, the price with and you mentioned this earlier how cremations are on the rise, right? What have you? And so I forget what the average in the Midwest is, but I know East Coast and West Coast has been substantially higher. Obviously, due their values are higher anyway, are a little bit more relaxed than ours are. Um, but obviously, it being a place of business and costs increasing everywhere in life in general. Um, Prices are increasing if not every year, every 5 to 10 years for sure, definitely.
Right, great. And so for me, help me out a little bit, brother. Help me out. It's my brother
Sure.
from another mother. So when I'm consulting with younger people, just say maybe in the 20 to 30-year age range, I'm always talking about the future. You get life insurance to protect from the inevitable, but we don't know when that's going to happen. And so you
Yeah.
you insure for today, but you also want to be thinking long term. And so I
Right.
think today $10,000 is sufficient. But if
Right.
I'm helping someone who's in their 20s or 30s plan for when they're 60, what should I be looking at as far as funeral pricing? Like, is there an average rate of inflation that can be calculated, or how do we determine that?
Well, I'll say this based on my experience. So you have things where we have circumstances when people took out plans 30, 40 years ago, right? Or what have you, that I've
Right.
seen. And so when I compare it to what current prices are now, you're seeing the prices have increased three times since the 70s and 80s and sometimes the 90s as well. And so I would recommend, two or three, anticipate at least two or three times the cost, 20, 30 years from now to have triple by that time. Definitely.
So what drives the cost in the funeral business? I'm kind of unfamiliar with that. As the prices go up, is it the cost of the materials, the casket price goes up, or what determines that price increase?
I would say that, that kind of thing, the caskets, obviously you have to, sometimes the funerals are renting cars, if they don't own them outright themselves. So the services, the library services are charging the funeral home by the hour. Those costs, are obviously factored into the price of, to the price that people, that's been assessed as well. Obviously with the cremation the rise, there's going to be obviously a different financial performance or what have you. So people trying to make up for those differences as well, any financial deficits. So all that plays a big factor in why prices increase throughout the years.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I appreciate you explaining that. I appreciate you explaining that. A lot of people probably assume that the price is going up because the funeral homes just want more money. That's not
Right.
you guys have your own expenses.
Then again, I say you mentioned it earlier. Now, not only is it a family business, you have people who are non family members who are also involved. And so again, people depend on the occupation to pay their bills. They have rent, gas, electric, mortgage, or what have you. So again, it's a place of business as well. And so, um, you know, I'll say our everyday American lifestyles are increasing. The quality of life is we hope is increasing as well as the cost of living is increasing. So same thing applies when you pass away. That cost is going to increase.
Now, one thing that I always think about, because being in the life insurance industry, it's about for me, it's about legacy
Yes.
and it's about impact. Those are like two words that come to mind. You're thinking about the future
Right.
and you're buying
Yeah.
a policy because you're hoping that money will impact your family, in some sort of way. And so let me ask you this: as a third generation member of a family business who's ingrained in the city, you've been around for 71 years.
Mhm.
We're hoping that you're around for another 71 more. But
Mhm.
what do you see as the future of Lawrence A. Jones Funeral Homes, and uh, you know, uh, what you all can do for the community moving forward? So just move forward about maybe 20, 30 years. What is Lawrence A. Jones Funeral Home to the community?
Man, I always say obviously service is always at the beginning of all of it. That's just the core of it. Service to the community. Of course, what the future has to hold, I think only God can make that decision or what have you. But definitely, service is always going to be at the pinnacle of this whole entire thing or what have you. So just respecting people, provide dignified services at an unfortunate time.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, like I said, I highly recommend you. Anytime anyone asks me about a funeral home in the city that I would recommend, it's always Lawrence A. Jones Funeral Home. I've worked with you guys several times. You've helped
Sir.
a couple of my clients, through their roughest time, um,
Hmm.
and they were very satisfied with the service, and so that's great. I think we got another question here. We always try to make sure that we get these questions answered because that's what it's all about. It says here,
Sure.
some relief now that many of the restrictions are now being uplifted amid COVID in its early stages. It was a major strain of how many people could attend the service of the deceased.
Yeah.
I'll hit that for you. We did cover that at the beginning. For those of you that are just tuning in, the replay will be available here on my page. You can also go to A.L. Johnson Life Insurance Agency on Facebook or YouTube, and you'll be able to see this from beginning to end. But correct
Yeah,
me.
I can explain it. I don't mind explaining it again.
What's that?
You want me to go ahead and explain it again to him? Yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Sure.
Yeah, so basically, we abide by any city ordinances. A mask is mandatory. Temperature checks are also mandated. Are enforced as well. COVID tracking sheets are also adhered to as well. So that's kind of within our protocol. We do encourage social distancing if if all possible. We try to encourage people to limit as much I guess gathering in crowds as much as possible. So a lot of private services are being held with public visitation just to keep the number down and keep everybody safe, staff and families as well.
Great, great. Last two questions. Are you all hiring or looking to have anyone join the team at Lawrence A. Jones?
I mean, always, yeah, we're always looking for eager, passionate, caring people to join the staff, whether it's administrative, whether it's serving families as funeral attendant, driving the cars. Always looking for people who have maybe HR experience and or what have you to help keep the daily operations going and ensuring that families are satisfied and that individuals' lives are honored to the highest ability.
So hopefully you guys hear that. Lawrence A. Jones is looking for some good talent. And so if you feel that you have something you can add to this great business here in our city, definitely reach out to Larnell Jones and the folks over at Lawrence A. Jones Funeral Home. We got another question from Mr. Brown. He says, what is the percentage of those who don't have any insurance to bury? Is Lawrence A. Jones handling things differently these days, asking for another individual who doesn't access social media?
That's really good. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for reaching out. That's a really, really good question. I really don't know personally what the comparison is for people who are insured and people who are not insured. But I do know that if there are people who have financial difficulties or challenges or what have you, we do our best to try to accommodate whatever the budget is, whatever the financial situation looks like. We do our best to try to come up with some a package or something that is comparable to whatever they're able to afford, but also still make it dignified and nice for their family and their loved one.
Perfect. Well, man, I appreciate you taking out your time.
Yeah,
This part two of how to avoid a family funeral crisis. If you didn't catch the first one, go to A.L. Johnson Life Insurance Agency on YouTube, and you can find that video. A lot of great information. It isn't an exact repeat. We talked about a couple different things there that'll help your family. And so definitely, you already got somebody here, Miss Angela Jackson. How you doing, Miss Jackson? She says she's a great florist, calling to looking to partner with the funeral home. And so, anyone who needs to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Awesome. Ask she can. So I can be reached obviously here on Facebook or on Messenger as well. Also, the office number is 816-921-1800. She can ask for either Lindsay Jones or DeLawrence Shepherd Sr. That either one would be able to assist them with possibly that partnership.
Great. And when it comes to if there's a family in need right now, I actually have a family I'll have to talk to you about, but they have someone who's incapacitated at the moment on the respirator. They know the time is coming. Is it the same number to contact for that specific situation? And then can you just break down really quick what that process will look like for them?
Yeah, so definitely feel free to reach out to us. The office number is 816-921-1800. You can ask for myself, or you can ask for my cousin, DeLawrence Shepherd Sr. Either one of us can assist with, or any of the staff members. Either one of us can assist with, to answer any questions, any concerns regarding pricing, services provided, you name it. We'd be more happy to do that for you as well.
Great. Well, man, I appreciate it. Definitely keep the questions coming in. People will address those in the comment section after the live stream. And for those of you who have been following the live stream series here on my page between A.L. Johnson Life Insurance Agency and Elevating Men, I do want you guys to put this on your calendar tomorrow at 7 p.m., March 10th. I'm going to have a huge interview with Mr. Omar Bradley. He's the 3-time mayor of Compton, California.
Nice.
It's going to be a very interesting conversation, bro. Like, you definitely want to check it out. I've got him for about an hour and 15 minutes. That's all I can get him for. But when I tell you, his story is amazing. He grew up in the original Piru neighborhood. If you heard about the Bloods, that whole thing. He was right there at the beginning of a lot of that. He was there during the Tupac murder.
Wow.
So, there's some great information there as well. And so we're just going to keep this thing rolling. Again, like I said at the beginning of this, and I really mean this from the bottom of my heart, our community is in the state that it's in because of a lack of knowledge. It's a lack of information. It's a lack of application, a lack of implementation. And we're trying our best here to eliminate that excuse of not having the knowledge. And so we're going to continue to bring on experts in their field. We're going to continue to ask the tough questions. And the only thing that we ask of you is that you that you share this with your network, that you engage with us, because it's important. It's important. The only way that we're going to change our community is by having tough conversations and taking tough actions. And so, let's make some change. Daryl Johnson, how you doing, brother? I need to reach out to you. He said great interview and great information.
Yeah.
And Mr. Brown, he said, forgive me for my redundancy. Man, listen, you are a faithful listener. I appreciate your support.
You're right.
Make sure, that we address those. But everybody, we appreciate your time this evening. If you're tuning in late, here within a few minutes, you'll be able to hop right back on and watch it from beginning to end. Grab a notepad because there's a lot of great information. We appreciate all of you. Any last words, Larnell?
Man, thanks for having me on. I definitely appreciate it. If you need to reach me, again, the number to the office is 816-921-1800. Also, like I said, I'm here at Facebook. What is it? Facebook.com/Larnell Jones. You can reach me there. I'm on Instagram at Life's Good. Anything I can do to assist, feel free to reach out to me. Be more than happy to assist.
Awesome. And if you're in the need of life insurance, if you have any questions, concerns, if you have a policy already and you just want it reviewed to make sure that it's going to fit the needs of your family, reach out to me at A.L. Johnson Life Insurance Agency. You can punch that in Google. You'll be able to find me. You can also look at Facebook and YouTube. Fairly easy to find. I try to be, and I'm always here to help. And so thank you all for tuning in. Have a great night.